Hello, Divorce and Beyond family. I've got some exciting news because we have teamed up with Headspace to guide you toward better mental health. With Headspace's meditation, mindfulness tools, and mental health support, you're set for a journey to a happier, healthier you. And there's more because if you sign up through our exclusive link, you'll enjoy 2 weeks of Headspace membership for free. So don't miss out on this opportunity to embrace your well-being. You can check out the show notes for the link or just go to divorcebeyond.com/headspace-Susan, and you'll be able to start your path to peace and joy today. This is just one more way that we can support you on your journey to a better beyond.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
When you finally come to that conclusion, I am in a trauma bond, I am in a dysfunctional, toxic relationship that is very harmful to me, and you have radical acceptance around that. So the first thing you do is you never let them see you coming. You can never tell a pathological person who wants to control you that you're leaving until you have all of your ducks in a row. How you start this process is so important.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today's episode is here to help those of you who may be standing on the edge of a critical decision, breaking free from a toxic relationship. We know January is often called Divorce Month, and that's because it's a time when many people take the first steps toward leaving their unhealthy relationships. It is a time of change, fear, and hope. And today's guest brings her incredible expertise to guide you through it. I am thrilled to be welcoming Dr. Nadine Macaluso, affectionately known as Dr. Nay. You probably already know her, even if you don't realize it, because she is the real-life inspiration behind Naomi, the character in The Wolf of Wall Street, played by Margot Robbie. But Dr. Nay is so much more than that. She is a therapist specializing in trauma healing and personal transformation. After escaping her own trauma bond, she went on to earn a master's in counseling and a PhD in somatic psychotherapy. And she is now the author of a powerful book, Run Like Hell, a therapist's guide to recognizing, escaping, and healing from trauma bonds. So in today's conversation, Dr. Nay shares some practical tips for starting the process of breaking free from those toxic relationships. We'll be talking about what a trauma bond really is, how it forms, and most importantly, how you can safely and strategically begin to take your power back. So whether you're realizing the dynamics of your relationship are unhealthy or you're already planning your next steps, this episode is packed with actionable advice and hope. If you're ready to take the first steps toward your beyond, stay tuned. This episode, entitled Run Like Hell, Practical Tips as You Start to Break Free from a Toxic Relationship, could be the turning point you've been waiting for. And now let's dive in with Dr. Nay. So Dr. Nay, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this interview and I'm delighted that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And we were just talking as we got ready to tape the interview, and this episode will air in January, and that is really the month that, as a divorce professional throughout my career, 30 plus years of being a divorce attorney, that is the month where we know people start looking for information on divorce. Like the decisions get made sometime over the holiday period. In January, people are like, all right, I think divorce is in my future. What is this going to look like? And so one of the things that I think would be really helpful for us as we dive into this topic is to look back to that time, say for you, and maybe some of the people that you help today, now from the other side of the fence, to what people need to know as they're going into this process and they've been in a relationship, an abusive relationship like you. But before we even go there, as I said in the intro, you don't have the typical story. In fact, right? And everyone out there probably knows quite a bit about your story. But for those who don't, or just to give people that layer of understanding from your perspective, tell us a little bit about how you came to be one of the most educated people, as I said earlier, on trauma bonds and healing from abusive relationships out there.
I had the quintessential trauma bond, as the movie that was made about my life, The Wolf of Wall Street, depicts. And so I got married at 22, a young babe in the woods, to a crazy person who, was, as he depicts in the movie, was addicted to drugs, and he ended up being quite abusive, and I ran like hell. But it was an arduous journey. I was married to him for 7 to 8 years, and it was very traumatic, right? That's why we call it a trauma bond, and it's very hard to leave, and that's the bond part. But I did leave him at 31, went back to school at 38 to get my master's, then got my doctorate. And as I was in school, simultaneously was when he wrote the book and the movie came out, right? So I thought to myself, who the hell is going to want to come to me now as a therapist? But as things happen in life, the things we worry about don't usually come to fruition. And actually, so many people did want to come to me because of what I had endured. Yeah. And then I saw in my practice all these smart, kind, beautiful women trauma bonded. And that's what made me go back to the research and write my book, Run Like Hell. And now I help women all over the world recognize, escape, and heal from trauma bonds.
Yeah, well, and Run Like Hell is such a wonderful title for the book. And as you said, at a certain point in time in the relationship, you were able to run like hell. But I know there are people out there right now listening who are like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get out. And you have a little bit different situation, as people will know from the movie. But for those who want to leave, this is, as you just said, it can be hard. It's complicated.
It's very complicated for many different reasons, right? Of course, emotionally, the trauma bonds is a very psychological, complex process that's not easy to extricate yourself from. But then also you're married, you have children, you have financial dependence. And so when you finally come to that conclusion, I am in a trauma bonds, I am in a dysfunctional, toxic relationship that is very harmful to me, and you have radical acceptance around that, as you say, what do you do? So the first thing you do is you never let them see you coming. You can never tell a pathological person who wants to control you that you're leaving until you have all of your ducks in a row, because it's not going to go well. So I always say in a trauma bond, they wear a mask right in the beginning. I call it Dirty John and Romeo. I want you to wear the mask and to their face, act status quo, like everything's fine. And behind the scenes, find an attorney, get credit cards in your name, open up a bank account, understand all your, really important documents. I even told this woman today, because a lot of time financial abuse is a big part of this. I said, you know what? Every time you go to Target or Walmart, get a gift card and start to stockpile gift cards, because the money is the first thing to get cut off. So that's, and also, of course, find a good attorney, and you need a therapist who's an expert in this, because like I was saying to this woman today, how you start this process is so important. And I'm sure you can attest to that.
My listeners have heard me say it so many times, and I'm just so delighted to hear you say that, because the beginning part of the divorce, I almost think, people make that decision that divorce is in their future and they feel like a gun went off and a race just started. And they start making what are very important decisions, such as picking a therapist, picking an attorney. And they're doing it from a place where usually they're not as informed as they need to be. And they're usually very highly emotional. So they're making emotionally based decisions, not rational, well thought out and educated decisions. And as you just said, it's very hard to walk back from some of those.
I mean, listen, the family court is not an emotional justice system. Okay. So you're not going to get emotional justice. And honestly, I would really say stay out of it if you can, but a lot of times you cannot mediate with pathological narcissistic people. And I understand that. And I know there's a whole collaborative process that usually doesn't work with them. So often you can find yourself in court. And that is why, as you're stating, you have to start off smart. And you don't have to know all the answers, but you do have to go to people that have the answers, or at least can guide you and have gone through this and are educated and experienced.
That's a great golden nugget. I like to have episodes that leave a little trail of golden nuggets for my clients. And that is a great one, right? There's part of this process as you're wearing the mask, as you just mentioned, everything's fine, everything's status quo. But what you're doing is finding those people.
That's right.
Finding that information and educating yourself on what you need to know and setting up that plan that you sort of talked about, having things in place. But maybe let's step back too, though, because for so many people, I was just talking to a colleague about this. In fact, it was Kate Anthony, who I know you've been on the Divorce Survival Guide, one of my favorite friends, colleagues, and a wonderful resource for people. And we were talking about the fact that because Kate is very immersed in the world of should I stay or should I go? And one of the things that we know is the statistics are that people think for about 4 years and sort of vacillate in that should I stay, should I go space before they make a final decision. That's a very long time. But part of it is we have no idea what a trauma bond is, what is happening emotionally for us in particular, these abusive relationships. So maybe you can explain that, just so I think people are going to resonate with your description of that, and it's going to help them to understand where they are.
Yeah. So a trauma bond at its most basic form, right, is any toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally attached people. However, so it could be between lovers, parent and child, employee, boss, but the way I talk about it is between intimate partners. And an important piece of it is that one of the partners, the pathological partner, wants power and control over their lover, right? In healthy dynamics, we don't need that. And there's two conditions that must be present: a power imbalance, meaning one of the partners has the power, right? They can get it through being threatening and dominating, instilling fear. They can get it simply by the fact that you love them. They have power over you. Or you might be financially dependent on them. So they have power over you, right? And so a power imbalance has to exist. And then the second thing is intermittent reinforcement. And this is the real bond of the trauma bond. This is what makes the trauma bond, where 70% of the time the partner's cruel, controlling, betraying, unkind, but that 30% they're generous, helpful, loving, love bombing you, right? And so those experiences with this lover are very extreme. They create extreme feelings in us, which make us bond. And the research shows that intermittent reinforcement, animal trainers that use it with their animals, right? The animals bond 230% more to the trainer than just straight kindness, which is a crazy research.
But if you think about it, it's so true, right? And don't you hear, I suspect you hear what I've heard from people so many times is they said, I never knew who I was coming home to or who was coming home, right? Was it going to be angry, upset spouse? Or was it going to be, you're the best, I love you? And that's that intermittent, reinforcement.
Yeah. And so it has to have those two conditions for it to be a trauma bond. And they can be very overt, as it was in my case. which was very extreme. The abuse was very extreme. I was in with a very grandiose person, or it can be covert, and then it can be trickier, right? Because it can be more subtle. And so often, and people don't understand that coercion, which is simply pressuring somebody to do what you want them to do instead of giving a person space or autonomy, is a really big piece of a trauma bond. And it's not so easy to see all the time.
Especially not when you're in it, right? When you're a part of that relationship. Plus, I really think it's important what you said about the fact that the relationship may not have started with that power imbalance. That very well may be something that one of the partners has created.
That's right.
Usually it doesn't happen overnight. It's over a period of time. Oh, honey, maybe you don't need to work so much. I'm bringing in enough money. Why don't you, take a little less time or work less or quit your job? Why don't you, Tiffany's not such a great friend for you, and maybe you don't want to spend so much time with her. It's usually a gradual erosion, and that imbalance starts to be created, isn't it?
Nobody walks in with a t-shirt and says, "Hi, I'm a pathological lover. I'm going to make you fall in love with me and then abuse you." Like, no, we all get tricked. It's a con man. It's a con artist. And the way I put it is that this person will use, harm, exploit, and betray you, and basically anyone, to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status. And you'll feel that you're being used. You'll feel that you're being exploited. You'll notice you're being betrayed, right? In between all the kindness. And once you see that and it's a pattern, and you don't see any change in behavior when they get caught, or they don't show any remorse, it's time to really take stock in what's happening.
And that's where maybe you start making that plan, but keeping that mask on. I like your allusion to that they always have that mask on. That's what brought you into the relationship. They're very good at that. And you mentioned love bombing. They're very, very good at that, especially in the early days of a relationship.
Once you start the divorce proceeding, there's a term called DARVO, right?
Yeah.
And so and this is what they do. Once you let them on to the fact that you're leaving them and they can't control you, they're going to use this tactic of DARVO, which is deny. They're going to deny everything they ever did. They're going to start to attack you, and they're going to start to make you the perpetrator. They reverse the victim and offender. And you really need to be aware of that tactic, because when it starts to happen to you, just like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? But just know, as you go into this divorce process, to be really Google the term. It's in my book, but Jennifer Braid came up with it. And it's a very important thing that happens in the family court system and once you start the divorce proceeding.
I think that that's a critical thought right there, that's where this education that we're talking about, reading your book, having a therapist who understands this information is so critical and important, because that education is what you just did, right? You just told people of one of the things to be aware of. And if you're aware, you can prepare, you can have strategies for dealing with these behaviors, because that is one of the things that at least I've found in my many years of, let's face it, people who are disordered end up in divorce situations quite often. So as a divorce attorney, I've had many, many, many cases where at least one of the parties had some sort of mental health issue and had, disordered behaviors, pathological personalities, whatever you want to call it. And that's one thing that I've learned over time, is that they do exhibit sort of a continuum of behaviors where if you're aware, you know what's coming. And that is very helpful as you run like hell.
Yeah, because when you think about it in the beginning, and I use this analogy of the invisible ships, but in the beginning, you didn't know who they were. You didn't see them coming, right? That was what allowed you to be tricked. You didn't know people like this existed. The same happens with them. Don't let them see you coming, so then you can prepare. And I love how prepare and aware is rhyming there. So I'm going to repeat it. And step into the fight of your life. because that's, as you know, what it can become. But if you're prepared, you get through it a lot smoother. I had a very intense case out of LA, and now we're friends now. We don't work together anymore. And she says to me, Dr. Nay, the way we started my case is how I won my kids. I won the money. Like, she won.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm so happy this episode is going to be something that, though we know so many people are looking for that information in January, I really can't emphasize to people enough that if they are in this type of damaging relationship and they are trying to leave it, mistakes made at this time because out of ignorance of just not knowing what you're dealing with, those are the ones that lead to the not movies that had, I don't know whether to call it a happy ending, but you did get out.
I did have a happy ending. Yes.
Your children are well.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. So you've moved into a new and happier and better life. So many people don't have that opportunity, or they go through an extended divorce process that is just a horror show because they didn't know what they were getting into as they went through this process. And that's why these tips that you're giving are truly, I mean, in some instances, it may sound extreme to people, but they can truly be lifesavers. Okay, we'll jump back into the conversation with Dr. Nay in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know that there is so much more to come in part 2 of this episode. Dr. Nay is going to share her powerful insights into what she calls the wraparound team approach to divorce, and you don't want to miss her golden nuggets of advice on building resilience and taking control of your future. Trust me, part 2 is packed with the kind of practical tips and hope that will empower you to take your next steps with confidence. But before we get there, let's take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, who makes this episode possible.
When you leave a trauma bond and you're starting this process, you must stabilize with self-care because you've been through something traumatic, and you must stabilize your body, your mind with self-care. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? You must exercise. You must fit it in, right? You can't talk about it to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but you have to keep the people who you talk to about it very small because you re-traumatize yourself, and you have to have amazing self-care to get through this.
Now, let's take a little minute to talk about something special. If you follow me on Instagram, you all know how much I love my evil eye pendant. I love I have my bracelet. I have the pendant that goes around my neck. I wear evil eyes all the time. And so many of you have reached out asking where I got them. I'm thrilled to share with you all, drum roll please, that my favorite jewelry source, Yumi You Jewelry, is now a sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. For me, Yumi You Jewelry is more than just jewelry. The symbols are symbols of strength, individuality, and empowerment. And they handcraft each piece with love and care. And so they are designed to help women stand out and embrace our unique personalities. So whether it's an evil eye like I have chosen for protection, a hamsa for faith, or any other meaningful symbol, their pieces offer beauty and inspiration even during these tough times like divorce. So here's the best part. Yumi You is giving my listeners an exclusive discount if you use the code BEYOND, that's BEYOND, all caps, at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. 20%. So if you're looking for a meaningful piece to keep you inspired or to protect you during this difficult time, visit divorcebeyond.com/YumiYu. That's YUMIYU. And treat yourself or treat someone you love to something special. You deserve it. Now, let's get back to the second half of the show.
If you've never done this before, you don't have the experience to guide you. And experience is our greatest teacher. And so that's why you have to really lean on your professionals. And guess what? If you go to a divorce attorney that doesn't get it, leave. if they don't get pathological personalities or they have a pathological personality, and you sense that, trust your gut. A lot of times I work with women and they're like, oh, I don't want to leave. We've been working together for so long. No, it's okay. They work for you.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you're the boss.
Yeah.
And, you just mentioned that the attorney might have a pathological personality. And I don't think in the many years I've had the podcast, anyone has raised that, although it's very true. A lot of people in professions such as law, doctors, finance,
Yes.
tend to be people who might have these pathological personalities. And I have found, I've had cases in my career where it wasn't just the client who I would say had the pathological personality, but perhaps their counsel as well. And so I think, yes, that's a really important thing for people to be aware of. If you think divorcing one pathological person's hard, try it when they team up.
Right. That's right. That's right. And, and it is a very intimidating process, but, that's where the body doesn't lie. And if your intuition says, no, this person doesn't get it, because divorce attorney, a therapist, they really have to understand that you're not crazy. You're not making it up. This person is pathological, whether they're showing covert or overt behavior. And a lot of people aren't up to speed on that.
No. And in fact, you've got both a master's and a PhD and a lived experience, which honestly, I do think layers into an understanding. You can't get around the fact that when someone has lived through something, there's just a layer of understanding that no one else can have. But I have to tell you, as a divorce professional, as an attorney, it's very hard, honestly, to find therapists, other attorneys, financial advisors who have a level of experience with this.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. And we're just, therapists gaslight my patients all the time before they come to me. You're over exaggerating. It's not that bad. Or I just did a video about couples counselors who don't take a bias against the abuser, because we were taught in school not to do that. So it's really important that you have someone that has the information and the knowledge. And I mean, I've gone to court with my patients. I've gone on Zooms, court sessions with my patients. I've gone and met with their attorneys with them, because it's a daunting process. And when I'm in it, I'm in it.
Well, and that has to, for your clients, you must be a lifeline.
Yeah.
I love that idea that you just shared of having your therapist who gets it, who understands, speak to your attorney. Yeah. Because that having an attorney who understands this, I've always told my listeners, we go to law school 3 years, and what we learn is some of the law. If you think we can learn every little aspect of the law in 3 years, can't happen. We learn some of it, but what we really learn is how to think like a lawyer, which is knowing how to take a law and take facts and apply them together. It's a very practical, logical, factual-based process.
Yeah.
Do we learn anything at all about psychology, dealing with personalities, mental health issues, any of this? No, we don't learn it at all. It's an experience-based learning for most of us.
Right.
And so the ability, to talk to someone like you as you're treating our client, just think about that benefit of being able to layer that in.
Yeah. Yeah. And most attorneys are open to it. I really haven't had any say no. And it also gives my patients just feeling of security, a feeling of confidence. And, as you were saying, when you do start to get divorced, you are emotionally dysregulated. You are vulnerable. And that's okay to recognize that and know that resilience cannot be built in isolation. You must rely on us, and that's okay. That's what we're there for.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think that for people, especially those listening right now who might be in the very early stages of divorce or still thinking, it can be very hard to understand exactly what is going on with all of these high emotions. But I've had other guests, mental health experts, explain it as, with that rush of the stress hormones, it's really a fact that your brain kind of shuts down for rational thought. So you may think you're making rational decisions, but you're not really.
No, and also I know when you leave a trauma bond, you have trauma symptoms, but there's also another symptom that you have, cognitive dissonance, that no other trauma experience has. People don't leave with cognitive dissonance after they've been through trauma unless they've been in a trauma bond, and that's because of the Dirty John Romeo masks. Is he good? Is he bad? Right? You're always wondering, is he good or is he bad? So you have cognitive dissonance about him, about you. Am I crazy? Is he crazy? Or the relationship. So you have 3 different layers with 6 different thoughts, which cuts off your executive functioning in your prefrontal cortex. We know that.
It's just gone.
It's just gone.
It's just gone.
So you might not be able to strategize initially for yourself till you've gone no contact, till your nervous system has calmed down, right? Till you're not getting flooded with cortisol. And so, yeah, it can be really hard to emotionally regulate and think strategically.
Right. And so it's actually important. I think, you said it the best way possible is to have that team in place, notably the well-trained therapist and an attorney who understands what you're dealing with, to help you because there are some decisions that may come up, but you should do that from as educated a position as possible with the assistance of your support professionals.
Yeah. And with the really tough cases, I call us a wraparound team. We have the divorce coach. Sometimes the lawyer and the therapist is not enough. And then we have the kids therapist. And then we have like an army of us marching with this one person.
But sometimes it takes an army. Sometimes it takes that team. I've had a few episodes where we've talked about the fact that many people think you hire an attorney and you're done. I've got a divorce attorney. Thank you for laughing, right? I'm laughing and I'm a divorce attorney, right? Again, go back to what we learned in law school. It has nothing to do with all these other things. And if someone had said to me, probably for at least the first 10 years of my practice, I think I'm trauma bonded to my soon to be ex. And, I'm having this difficulty, that difficulty. They've love bombed me. I wouldn't have known what they were talking about.
That's right. We've only really started to talk about this really within the past 8 years, maybe. Right. Maybe. And so thank God it is there. But you bring up such a good point in that you do have to be your own advocate. Yes, we are there for you. And it's not our divorce. It's not your divorce attorney's divorce. It's not your therapist's divorce. I think it's a part of the person that's leaving this person to really gain agency and autonomy through the divorce process, where they start to find their voice and they have to document. They are as much a part of the process too. Like we are there, but it is their divorce.
Yeah. And ultimately it's their future beyond the divorce as well.
Yes.
And that's what they need to be working toward. But it can be very hard when you're caught in this moment with all those emotions and stress hormones and all of the things running through you. You can't even imagine that future, what we call here beyond.
And you bring up a really important thing that, when you leave a trauma bond and you're starting this process, you must stabilize with self-care, because you've been through something traumatic and you must stabilize your body, your mind with self-care. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? You must exercise. You must fit it in, right? You can't talk about it to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. There's no justice here. I know you want it and it's normal, but you have to keep the people who you talk to about it very small, because you re-traumatize yourself, and you have to have amazing self-care to get through this.
Yeah, such a good point that you can't just run around, because I know that it's, you as you start to wake up to what was happening in the relationship and the fact that you've suffered abuse, and it's very appealing to tell your story to anyone and everyone who will listen. I understand that. And for someone to say, that's awful, that happened to you, I can't believe that. But as you just said, you're re-traumatizing yourself. And honestly, you're giving potential weapons
Yes,
to your spouse.
that's right. That's right. And, and then also people might say stupid things, that might send you reeling, because they don't get it. So
Because they don't know what they're talking about either.
like your therapist and two people that you can go to that are your touchstones, but then that's it. Because otherwise, as you know, and this is very hard to do, consumes your whole life.
And you're somewhat cemented in that victim role. And part of this is, moving away from that and not letting them have you
That's right.
be that person.
That's right.
You've said this best in that, the education that you need in this moment is vital, because more so in this type of a divorce or leaving this type of a relationship, it's understanding what you're dealing with and then having the right strategy.
Yes.
More so than in any type of, it's always good to have a strategy when you're negotiating, et cetera.
Right.
But this is like, you absolutely need a strategy to deal with everything that's coming at you. And you've really run like hell, to talk about your book for a moment, is that layer of education for people.
Yeah, when people say, "Well, you signed my book," and so I always sign my book, and my one thing I say is, "Education leads to empowerment. The best is yet to come." That's just it. Is that education leads to empowerment, and you will get through it. There is another side, and a lot of times we talk about gray rocking. I know often when you get that email from them or you get that text from them, right? It's so scary. It can be so scary because you're used to being scared by them, right? But that's when you take your control back and maybe you open it up when your therapist is on the Zoom, right? You don't have to go through it alone. Maybe you don't open it up till your kids are asleep, right? They don't live in your house anymore. I always say, try not to let them live in your head. And these are little ways that you can take your power back. They sound minor, but you don't have to jump every single time you get a text or an email or a phone call. And it's very important to not do that.
That's living on that, in that hyper state, hyper vigilance all the time, because you've probably been living there for years if you've been in one of these relationships. So one of the things I want to make sure that my listeners know is that you have they have the ability to download the first chapter of the book. So can you tell them how to do that?
They can just go to my Instagram and they can go to my link tree. It's The Real Dr. Nadine. And there's the first chapter is there. And I don't know if it's on my website. It might be on my website, drnay.com. And also on my website, I have so many free resources: trauma bond assessment, pathological lover assessment, complex PTSD assessment. Because again, I want you to take these assessments to know, what symptoms do I have? What level of pathological lover was I dealing with? Am I in a trauma bond? If you score more than 7 out of 14, you're in one, right? So again, use all the free resources. They're there.
I love that you have those. I love that you have, what am I in a trauma bond, right? There may be people who are listening who say, well, yeah, I kind of think there's a power imbalance. Yeah. Does it rise to the level? Is it that bad? Right. So go take the quiz. I always put all the links in the show notes. So those will be available to everyone, but drnay.com is your website, NAE. And I'm going to recommend, it's The Real Dr. Nadine on Instagram. I'm also going to recommend you go follow her on Instagram, everyone, because she does wonderful, wonderful videos that are just full of information and in those quick bites that I think are so helpful to people.
Very, very quick bites. And I just, when I answer all my own direct messages, up to this point, I try.
I was going to say, uh-oh.
Up to this point, I can. And it's beautiful because I hear from women all over the world that say, I'm not crazy. Your social media validates me. I don't feel so alone. One little video can just wake something up. in somebody.
Yeah. That is one of the most terrifying parts of trying to emerge from one of these relationships, because you do feel so alone. And that seems to be very universal for everyone I've ever talked to. And in my own experience, just, you feel like you are the only person who's ever gone through this.
That's right.
That's one of the reasons why I so appreciate that, you went from one side of this fence to the complete other side of the fence of being an expert in this area. And you've taken, what was your own very, very traumatic and public life situation and have turned it into something where you're helping people every day go through this in a better way than any of us ever had to. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for writing the book and making it available. I will have a link to the book as well in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining me and helping people today get that start on how to get out of this abusive relationship.
Yeah. And, I know if you're in it, listening right now and you're feeling hopeless and helpless, just take one step tomorrow. People say, oh, I'm afraid I don't know who to call. You know what? Ask people, make a phone call, and just show up. Show up to the therapist, show up to the attorney. Don't think too much.
People wait and they think they have to have everything in place before they take that step. Just make that one step, be safe, take your steps in a safe way.
Show up, and you'll be shocked when you leave that attorney's office how different you're going to feel.
And every day will be another step to your beyond, everyone. And it will be a beautiful beyond. Thank you so much for Dr. Nay for joining me. This has been a wonderful episode.
Thank you so much for having me on, and have a very happy holiday.
You too. Thank you. And a happy new year. Wasn't that a great episode with Dr. Nay? I know it was powerful, and I'm thinking that it would be really helpful to wrap things up with 3 golden nuggets, those key takeaways from this conversation for you to keep top of mind as you move forward. So here we go. Golden nugget number 1, never let them see you coming. Dr. Nay emphasized the importance of keeping your plans private when preparing to leave a toxic relationship. Stay status quo on the surface, but behind the scenes, start building your plan, find a trusted attorney, open your own bank account, and gather essential documents. Golden nugget number 2, awareness leads to empowerment. Understanding trauma bonds is the first step to breaking free from them. Once you recognize the patterns like intermittent reinforcement and power imbalances, you can start to take action and reclaim your power. And golden nugget number 3, resilience can't be built in isolation. So build your support system that includes professionals who truly understand your situation, whether that's a therapist, attorney, divorce coach, or even a full wraparound team. The right people can make all the difference. Remember, taking even one small step today is progress toward your beyond. If you'd like to learn more from Dr. Nay, be sure to check out her book, Run Like Hell, A Therapist's Guide to Recognizing, Escaping, and Healing from Trauma Bonds. You can find it in the link in the show notes, along with all of her free resources. So thanks again for listening to Divorce and Beyond. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and join me next week for another inspiring conversation to keep you moving forward with confidence and strength. Until then, remember, there's a bright, beautiful beyond waiting for you. You've got this. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.